Well, hi there, everyone. I want to welcome you all here to Rock Legends on the Prog Monster. My name is Murph. I am the host of this show. This is a show dedicated to progressive rock and other forms of rock music. So we're here featuring Ronnie James Dio tonight. Yes, the Dio. Here he is in his own band. So I'm going to be talking a bit about Ronnie James tonight. That's my goal. Go through some of his albums and bands he's played with. So, for those of you not overly familiar with Ronnie James Dio, he is primarily known for his role as the lead singer for both Rainbow and Black Sabbath at different time periods, of course. But he has a lengthy history in the rock music and in music in general. So he was born July 10th, 1942, passed away, I believe it was maybe it was May 16th, 2010. So he was, I believe, 69 years of age when he passed away. So born in the 40s, actually born prior to the baby boomers, like pre-baby boomer, I guess, we might want to call it. And when he was in his teens, he developed a interest in singing and vocal music. Got quite a strong voice, very strong, absolutely great sounding voice. Can't say enough about it. Started out doing kind of crooning stuff with stuff in the I think it was in 1958. I think that's when he kind of started it, the ball rolling, and just moved through music until he ended up with a band called Elf. And that's him there. So there's a picture of them all on the back here. Maybe you can see it. I believe he's this guy here. Long hair. So Ronnie James Dio was a small, diminutive type guy, 5'4", but larger than life on stage. Booming voice. Absolutely booming voice, and a voice that was almost operatic in its sound, but also very kind of emotional, very charged emotional. One of the most charged emotional voices of anybody I've ever heard as far as rock music goes. So he started, like I said, his career with Elf, was playing with them for, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 albums. I think they had maybe 2 or 3. It might have only been 2, actually. But they were backing up Deep Purple in the 70s, when at the time period when Ritchie Blackmore was part of the Deep Purple band and was getting close to a point where he decided to go on his own. And he asked Ronnie James to join him as his lead vocalist. And actually, I think they used the entire Elf band as his band when they first went out as Rainbow. But Ronnie stuck with the band and joined Rainbow, Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow here. This is a good album. I think this is the first kind of time when I began, I actually came into Ronnie when he joined Black Sabbath with Heaven and Hell, but I went back, of course, immediately looking for stuff that he had done, and this was one of them. Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow. Lots of good stuff on here. You've got Self-Portrait on here, Man on the Silver Mountain. Where is it? I'm looking for it. I don't see it. Oh, Temple of the King, Snake Charmer. If you don't like rock and roll, there's lots of good stuff on here. Still I'm Sad. Catch of the Rainbow was one of my favorite tracks. And you really hear how strong of a voice he has on this, In general, he had a strong voice, but this is where I started realizing he could sing those ballad-like songs, but give them a metal flavor to them. Of course, he then helped produce this album, which is one of the great rock albums in history, one of the first metal albums, I think. And of course, he wrote all the lyrics here. You'll be seeing him again next month, of course. But yeah, just some. He had this way of writing music that he used a lot of rhyming and almost sing-song type rhyming at that. This is a really strong album. Kind of put him on the. To me, this put him on the radar screens for everybody. People started noticing him right here. Now, he had been playing music for a long time at that point, almost 20 years by the time he was getting some serious attention. That's dedication, you know. That's what I liked about Ronnie. He was dedicated. He was a very personable type of guy, too. I've seen many interviews with him. He was always well-liked. But he seemed to get hooked up with guys that weren't easy to get along with, and Richie Blackmore qualifies as one of them for sure. So he also played on a third Rainbow album, this one, Long Live Rock and Roll. This was his final one back in 1978 before his departure. So he left Rainbow at that point and went on to this band, Black Sabbath. This was the replacing Ozzy Osbourne, and people were not. You'll hear people talk that, oh, this band isn't nearly as good as Black Sabbath was with Ozzy. I don't think that's right. I think they had a lot of success with the Dio era. They wouldn't have come back and do another album later in the career and then form another band after that in order to keep it going. He wouldn't have. This is one of the strongest albums, one of my 5 favorite albums of all time. And you can see, like, I took to this easily. It was heavy. It was hard rocking. Like, very new wave of heavy metal sounding. You know, to me, that's what it sounds like. And Dio's voice is booming on this album. Booming. All the songs are great. Yeah, probably one of my favorite albums of all time, for sure. So, you know, Ronnie... he had an initial good part to his joining Black Sabbath. They seemed to hit it off almost immediately with this album, and again on this album, the next album, which was even, I think this actually did better. It's not one of my favorite albums by them, but I like Heaven and Hell more, but this still did very well. Lots of really good stuff, and another Martin Birch production here too. But you know, when he was with the band at this point in time, they hit it off very well. They were able to put a style of music that was becoming very popular at the time. His voice was strong. They toured and did well, but for some reason, and I'm not 100% sure, I've heard different stories about why they ended up breaking up. The consensus seems to be that they blamed him for sneaking back into the studio and changing stuff after it was recorded, and he says that never happened. I tend to believe him. I found him to be a very honest, straightforward type of guy. I'm not really sure why that all took place, but he left the band at that point and decided that it was time to go solo. Although he did come back eventually. So he went solo, formed the Dio band. I think they did 10 albums in total over their career. Many musicians played in this band over that time period. Vivian Campbell being the most notable guy, I think, of them all. He had Vinny Appice. I believe Vinny Appice played with him on this album as well. So they formed, yeah, I think that's what happened. The two of them left Sabbath and formed this band. And this music isn't totally different from Black Sabbath. Maybe not quite as heavy, but very similar. The vocals, of course, are very similar. This album is great. It's one of his best. So he had 3 really great albums in his career, and a bunch of other albums that were quite good as well. So by this time, he's just sailing. You know, I remember him talking about playing playing at Madison Square Gardens when he went solo and feeling like he had arrived. That's where it had always been a big thing to him to be playing at Madison Square Gardens. Now, I've actually seen Dio twice. Once with Black Sabbath when they were on I believe it was the Mob Rules tour. And then again, I saw him on the Holy Diver tour, but it was at Massey Hall with a couple of other bands at the time. Both times, he was absolutely booming. He was fantastic. His voice is unlike most heavy metal bands. I think he has one of the most unique sounding voices. You can always tell when it's him as well. And he came back to Sabbath at some point. I think it was in 93, 92. They met up somewhere. He met up with Geezer Butler. And they had a conversation, and then it ended up he came back to Sabbath. I think this was Appice was with him again here. I think it was the four of them, what you would call the Mob Rules band back here to do this album, Dehumanizer. This is a very good album. Now, they hadn't been together at this point in a decade, so they came back and they did this album. I thought it was one of their better later albums, and it looked like it was going to go good again, and then this didn't stick together. So I guess whatever their animosity wasn't really 100% cured at that point in time. I remember when I was in high school, probably I think it was the first year that I had joined the health club near where I lived, and hearing his stuff on the radio, and there was hearing an interview with him going on the radio about this conflict he had with Ozzy. And really the conflict was more in Ozzy's mind than I think it was in his mind. He just simply it's got to be tough to come in and take over for somebody like Ozzy Osbourne, and the fans are not going to be kind. So, but he put up with that, and he took it, and he won the fans over. That says a lot about his character to me. I mean, Ozzy at that point had been with Sabbath for almost a decade and put out like some huge albums, and they were well known, and Ozzy was doing well himself on his own. And the fans just weren't, he won them over. That's what happened. He took some abuse initially, but he kept to it, and he won them over. And that's hard to do, especially when you're replacing somebody that well known. But I think for me, I like Ozzy's music. I think Ozzy's perfect sound for Sabbath and everything. But I think Dio is just a better vocalist all around, and more powerful, and held himself together well too, and always did the right things. That's the thing I liked about him. For me, I had gotten out of music for some time, and when I did come back to it, I was periodically listening to him, and not always going out and looking for new stuff. And I did not know that he had passed away until I had been listening to stuff for a while, and then somebody said, he's actually passed away, and I didn't know it. So I missed that. It was kind of a little bit of a shock to me that it had happened and I hadn't heard about it. So that's how far out of the music part I was when I came back. And I think I found out it was probably in around the time period when I moved here to where I live now, to this area. So it was probably been about 3 or 4 years after he had passed away. So, but now that couldn't happen. I would hear about it immediately. But back then, that's the way it was. You just didn't pay attention to stuff, and then you'd find out, unless you were actually watching the news every day, which was not the case with me. Anyways, I always liked Dio. I always thought that for such a small individual, he just had one of those booming voices, unlike anybody. And I'll go as far as to say he's had periods of time, and probably still is my favorite vocalist of all time. Just absolutely great. His lyrical abilities are different. The magical wizardry of his lyrics, that fantasy role that he always liked to write about, the fantasy world, you know. That's the things that I remember the most about him. I remember when I went to see him at Massey Hall, because it's such a smaller venue. It's like, I think it houses about 2,000 people. So not a huge venue, unlike the Gardens, which held like 20,000. So you were closer to him, and I was always struck with how powerful his voice was. So that's my take today. I wanted to talk about Ronnie James Dio. For me, it feels like I missed the boat when he passed away, and I kept putting this off for some reason. I'm not really sure why, but today I decided I was going to do it. And so there you have it. That's kind of my take on Ronnie James Dio, and one of the great heavy metal vocalists of all time. You know, now I'm thinking about it, he would be like, he's a year younger than my mother, so he'd be like 83 now. You know, and when I was growing up, people just didn't make it till they were 83. But now it's common; everybody's making it that far. It's just unfortunate that they were just starting a new band, the Heaven and Hell band, and they put out an album, and you know, they were only out for about a year when he got diagnosed and died of complications from his stomach cancer. A sad day, I think. Anyways, I don't want to go on too much about it anymore. I just wanted to bring him up today and talk a little bit about my experiences with Ronnie James Dio. So I hope you've enjoyed this kind of take on it. Please hit the like and subscribe. If you want, you can leave comments about Ronnie or about any of the bands I mentioned, or about his albums or anything like that in the comment section below. And we will see you all next week. We're going to go back to Into the Prog Verse, where I'm going to come up with a new topic. I've been thinking about it. I'm not quite sure what I want yet, but it'll probably be out in the next day or so. So take care, have yourself a good one, and goodbye here from the Prog Monster.